Hello, everyone. Thank you for doing that, Sherry. I didn't want it to be like the Patti Barker show tonight.
You're welcome.
Anyway, I have a short video I'm going to show you that's kind of a how-to video on how I use the dryer method. But before we get to that, I have kind of a shopping list of sort of disclaimers. The first one being that everyone has their own way of doing things, and I'm just sharing with you tonight what I've figured out works for me. I've been doing it over 12 years, and um, sort of a neck injury. I had neck surgery, is what brought me to using the dryer method.
Oh, well, you stop that, Cleopatra.
Oh, someone's not muted, I think.
Uh-oh.
Um,
Okay.
so the next disclaimer is really the dryer method. It's definitely not energy efficient, except your body. It does take the place of all the felting portion, but not necessarily the fulling portion of the process. Before I start the video, though, I definitely want to share with you that in my practice, I rinse and use the plastics over and over and over again. The only time I make sure I'm using a new one is if I'm working in white, for obvious reasons. I recall the first time I made a beautiful white shawl, only to find there were a couple of pink spots from dye residue from the plastics. So I shot different parts of this video over different projects. So don't let the different projects in the plastic sort of distract you from the method that I'm trying to teach. And then one last note, everyone's dryer is different. So please do yourself a favor, make a sample, try your dryer out with these methods and see how fast or slow it works for you. Obviously, if it's, over felting it, then back off the time period and maybe the heat as well. Use those materials you're going to use for a larger project to see how your dryer is going to react. I think that's pretty much the disclaimers. I like to use a 3 mil plastic for felting in the dryer. Begin by cutting plastic larger than your project. You can duct tape pieces together for larger projects. Next, you're going to lay out your project on the plastic and wet it. Here's where I like to use the really thin 0.7 mil painter's drop cloth plastic on top of a project before patting it out or using a sander. This plastic is too thin to use under your project as it can cause distortion in the felt or at least produce uneven shrinkage. Next, roll it up and place it inside a knee-high stocking for a narrow scarf project, or a pantyhose leg for a medium project, or pantyhose itself for a large project, one end in each leg. You can press a little bit of the excess water out of your project as you're putting it inside the hose. Tie a slip knot in the end. You'll be glad you did when you take it out of the dryer. But you're going to toss this package into the dryer with a towel on low heat for about 10 minutes. The thumping action of the bundle dropping over and over in your dryer will begin to bond the fibers. Remove the bundle after 10 minutes, unroll it, and check for wrinkles or anything that might need to be fixed, and then roll it back up, starting at the opposite end. Place it in the dryer for another 10 minutes. You're going to repeat this process approximately 3 to 4 times. This will replace all the physical rolling, but not necessarily the fulling process. Whatever's on the outside portion of your roll will felt quicker than the rest of the roll. That's why we repeatedly unroll and roll it back up from the opposite end. For longer or larger projects, it's a great idea to roll both ends toward the middle and insert this into the pantyhose. After the first set, remove the top plastic and put it back in the dryer for a couple more sets. Fulling by hand is the best way to consistently monitor the shrinkage. Because we have rolled a scarf end to end a few times, it has not been felted in the opposing direction. You can fold it up a few times, but then roll it in your hands is the best way to accomplish this. You're going to roll it between your palms, rolling it firmly onto itself. And where possible, stretching is also a part of fulling. So continue palm rolling the entire piece several times, alternating with stretching, until the wool firms up. It should feel like a wet suede. So there's the basics of the dryer method. Thanks for watching, and have fun when you try the dryer method.
Hopefully that worked for everyone, because I couldn't see any of you to check.
Well, there were like some bars across the screen, but I think it's still conveyed.
Okay, good.
So I barely touched on fulling in this video, but obviously heavier pieces may need some tools to shape, and of course stretching and steaming. I have used the dryer for fulling, but it really doesn't compact the wool enough. You know, that's what fulling is, the process of really compacting the wool and making a nice firm felt. And one thing I always like to tell my students is you can always come back and work on it later. If you look at it tomorrow and it's dry and it seems spongy or fluffy or just didn't shrink enough, you can always, I don't care if it's next week or next year, you can wet it again with soapy water and continue fulling it. I think it was Judith Pokes and Pam DeGroot who taught me to push my fulling further. My work improved quite a bit when I learned rolling it onto itself and also really going that extra mile to full it down further. Honestly, I could do another whole presentation on just fulling and shaping, but in the essence of time, let's open it up to questions.
So the first one is, please remind me of the weight of the black plastic.
Oh, it's 3 mil. I like to use those contractor trash bags. My husband always seems to have them around. And if you cut it down the middle of the bag and the sides, you end up with 2 nice long pieces that allow you to lay out a 90-inch scarf on each one. So, any other questions?
I've heard there can be issues with large projects damaging the dryer. Have you had any issues?
Good question. The only time I've had trouble with the dryer being damaged, I used to have a secondhand dryer out in my barn that I used for felting. And sometimes I would leave big projects in there while I go to lunch or go into town for the afternoon and come back. And the water, there would be water, you know, the fins inside the dryer. Well, the base, after doing this for, I'll say about 2 or 3 years, the base of those fins, they're just screwed in under the cover and they rusted, and a fin broke off during a project one time. So if you get a lot of the excess water out, you don't want all of it out because you need to keep your wool moist, but if you get most of the excess water out and you don't leave it in there for a long period of time, you shouldn't have any trouble. I've been using my new dryer in my new home for 2 years, but I watch it pretty closely and I have had no trouble with it damaging the dryer.
All right, and is it a dry towel or a wet towel that you put in with the work?
Well, you know, that's a great question too. I use both. If it's a very large project, I'll use a dry towel because it's going to absorb quite a bit. But if it's a scarf or a smaller project, I'll use the towel that I used on the table to keep it from dripping. It's still part of it's wet, but part of it's dry, and I'll use that. So either or.
And the next one, I put mine in a cold dryer initially. Did you have warmth?
That is a great question. I used to try it on no heat, and it just seemed to take forever. When I added low heat, not medium, but just like low heat on delicate
fabrics, I got a much better result. The beginning stage of felting is ironically called felting, but it's where we just really want the fibers to begin to bond together. They're not felted all the way. They're just kind of a pre-felt in essence. And so I found a little bit of warm heat helps that process actually help, moves it along.
And have you used this method for things other than lawn scarf type projects?
Oh, yes. I use it for every large project. That was what the pantyhose giggle was about. If I'm making a coat or a large, garment like a gown or something, I roll it up lengthwise and I'll put one end in one leg of the pantyhose and the other part in the other leg and tie the panties, which is kind of tough, in a big slip knot. And I've done large projects for, I don't know, probably about 8 years in the dryer. Again, it's just for the felting stage in the beginning. I do all the fulling by hand because I can get a better finish that way.
Can you use this for Nuno felting as well?
Oh yeah, that's mostly what I do. I have lately, I'm going to be teaching baskets and journal covers, and those aren't really necessarily Nuno felt. So I've been starting those in the dryer lately, but most of my work consists of Nuno felt. And it's everything from very thin to, even heavier outer garments.
All right, that's all that's in there right now. Does anyone else have a question?
Thank you very much for listening to my little presentation. I hope you try it and learn your own ways of doing things, and keep on felting. Thank you.
I wonder if any of our members have done this before and have other things that they found out when they've done it.
Good question.
Use their dryer.
I use the dryer a lot. I use a dryer on a lot of things. Let me see if I can find a video on here. I use the dryer on many things. I use the hottest setting I can get on my dryer. In my experience, when I use a heavier plastic, it takes longer for it to happen. So I go with the
What
lightest.
weight do you use,
I
Jill?
use a 1 mil plastic.
You don't find that it distorts things in the dryer?
I have not had that experience with it.
Wow.
I watch it closely. I love putting it in a stocking leg. That's genius. I've always just tied it. Some of them get bulky, and I've done, I did a 3-yard piece for Convergence, and of course it had to be 30% bigger. And I've also found that with Nuno felting, the more complicated the project is, the better luck I have getting to stick with the dryer. And I do think it's the beating it and thumping it around.
I have to agree.
That's the only thing I can think of. I have to admit I'm a little less careful with pressing all the water in it thoroughly and completely. There is a lot of extra water, and that extra towel soaks up some of that water.
Yes.
I use a rolled up towel as a header. It's got just a little bit of water in it.
So you mean inside your roll? What do you mean by header?
Well, like if you're doing flat, you put a pool noodle and roll it around the pool noodle. So I use a rolled up towel with just enough water to give it a little bit of weight.
Yeah, well, that might be, that would felt it quicker. When I first learned this method, it was with Judith Dios, and she was rolling it up around a towel, which made it a pretty bulky package. And then she was using Velcro straps around it every few inches. Then we all were supposed to take our bundle home and come back the next morning. And this was, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. And she may do it differently now, I don't know. But people were complaining that it was so heavy that it was making so much noise, they thought it was going to break their dryer. And
It
I
could get
personally
bad.
found that the Velcro straps came undone and stuck somewhere
Oh,
else.
yeah.
And it was really a mess. I just keep it simple. It's just the project's felted between plastic. It has nowhere else to go but bond to itself.
Yeah.
And roll it up and slip it in that pantyhose, and it's going to keep everything right where you put it. But interesting that you use high heat. I'd like to try that.
I'm going to try your method too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
You don't use any kind of header, you just roll it.
Nope, not
Okay.
at all. I will fold the plastic over the end, but
Right.
I don't use anything in the very middle. I do
Right.
about a 2.5, 3-inch fold to begin with, so
Okay.
that it's not going to stick to itself anywhere. I've got it sandwiched between
Right, right.
plastic already, but I give it a little. But no, I don't put anything inside the roll. Just
Oh.
fills
Well, I
fine.
haven't sandwiched it between plastic, so I'll try that and see. It does get pretty heavy when you start doing coats or yardage or something, but
Right.
it does hold things in place and works a lot quicker. I highly recommend people use the dryer for small pieces too, even.
Yeah.
I do card bats with my leftover scraps of wool and make pre-felts in the dryer.
Right.
And I get in a hurry from time to time. I've gotten kind of sloppy, and some of the, once some of the ties came off, and the piece still worked. And that, it was a pre-felt. It wasn't a complicated piece, but
Right.
I'm pretty confident with working in the dryer. So I'm glad you did that presentation. Thank you. And
Thank you.
can't wait to
I
try
love this. I love this
Yeah.
cross-pollination of learning from each other. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I can't wait to try the stocking method. That's yes.
Well, it's funny because I'm retired. I don't wear them anymore. And so I'm like getting some from my sister. I get them at Goodwill. They sell only the new ones they'll take in the package. And it's like, I hate to buy them, but I do.
Yeah.
I have a big box of them and I use them till they have so many runs that I have to toss them. Then they
And
make good ties around a roll. So
I've always just used them as ties. But I reuse the plastic over and over and over. And I still feel like I'm drowning in plastic. But I found out, I've found I haven't had to rinse it. I just hang it up.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I have products that aren't color fast. So, once you put soap and change the pH with the soap and put it in a little bit of heat in the dryer, especially red, it'll look like someone died in the dryer. To wipe it out with a little bleach or something, but it works fine.
Well, thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Patty, someone just really quick, I wanted to catch up on the chat because Patty can't see it. Someone said putting it in a stocking is like doing I don't know if they meant bat on a ball but it says a bad on a ball like Natasha Smart does.
Oh yeah.
I will have to try it, but I'm not sure my dryer has temp control. And this says the dollar store sells them too. I'm guessing she's referring to the pantyhose, of course. And then a question is, would elastic bandages work?
Elastic bandages. Well, I'm thinking they're the ones that wrap around and around, right? Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, think about the pantyhose or the knee-high stocking. It's like sausage. It's like, how the sausage has the outer skin, but then all the good stuff's inside. It's kind of encased in it. So I'm thinking the bandages, they're either open ends or they're rolled and it could all come undone. I mean, although like Jerry said, sometimes that works anyway, holding it together. But if you want things to stay where you put them, you want to keep it encased where they can't come apart at all. Does that make sense?
Kathy, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yes.
Okay.
I learned originally from Nicola Brown a number of years ago. And we just used thin plastic, the painter's plastic on both sides, and a little bit longer so that you can fold on the ends. And we rolled them in towels. And then we used strips of t-shirts to tie several places along the way and threw it in the dryer. Once again, on fairly low heat for like 15 minutes and then unrolling it and turning around. So the only difference was using the towel. And we
Right.
also threw towels in the dryer. So,
And
and
I'm sorry.
it worked great.
Yeah.
It
I'm
worked great.
wondering, I'm just wondering if the towel inside the thin plastic is what's saving it, because I don't put any header inside, as
No,
Jerry
the
called
towel
it.
doesn't go inside the thin
Oh, it doesn't.
plastic. It's rolled in the thin plastic, and then the towel goes around it. It's rolled on the outside.
Oh, on the outside. It's
So
rolled up with it.
it's yeah.
See, I don't
the
roll
plastic is all
anything.
rolled up, and then the towel is rolled over it.
Yeah.
And then
Interesting. Yeah, I don't put any towel in the package at all. The towel is separate. And I'm thinking that the thinner plastic, especially sandwiched, or like Jerry uses it around a towel, I'm thinking maybe those methods have kept it from getting distorted. But I roll it up just in the plastic and put it in the knee high. And when I do that with just the thin painter's plastic, the whole thing can get distorted. Like if it's a coat, I've had the collar get all bunched up and felt that way, and you can't really stretch it back out.
no.
And I've seen a lot more felting on the outside of the package than anywhere else. So whatever, like if the hem's on the outside, or if you roll it to the left side of the coat is felted more, and the right side's too big and the sleeve's too long, and you got to catch all that up by hand, because when you put it back in the dryer the opposite way, it doesn't necessarily catch it up. It's crazy. So anyway.
All right, there is another comment in the chats. Someone also just said they use stockings or knee highs, and you just mentioned knee highs, so you kind of covered that. But I was in a class that used the bandages around a garment in the steam pot for eco dyeing and worked great. And a different instructor used Vet Wrap 9, the self-sticking bandages used for horses and dog injuries.
Well, that sounds like dyeing. This is tumbling in the dryer. It's when you're dyeing the eco printing, you're just steaming it in a pot. So the difference is the tumbling, right?
Right. And then there's another question. Do you, and I like this one because I was gonna maybe ask it sort of the same idea. Do you use this method for pieces with internal resists? If so, any special techniques to avoid ridges on the edges? And I would add to that, I know you do a lot of sculptural felting because I've seen it on your pieces. Even though you have garments, you still have elements that stick out and stuff. Do you still use, can you still use the dry method with that? And is there any extra precaution you take with that?
Well, because I'm only doing the first stage of felting in the dryer, I use multiple resists, stacked resists. I use completely closed resists on garments, all kinds of resists in amongst the whole layout. And the first stage in the dryer just pretty much bonds all the wool. I'm not really doing a lot of shrinking yet, so the resist buckling isn't a problem. But that being said, the dryer can put wrinkles in things. So every time you take it out, you need to look for wrinkles on both sides, and you can stretch them out early in the process. If you don't see them and you keep going in the dryer, they end up permanent. But I usually will remove those resists during my fulling process, not even necessarily at the beginning, but somewhere in the fulling process when they're starting to buckle, I cut them out and finish the technique then.
Do you have like as far as the 3-dimensional stuff, do you ever have to worry about, I know you probably work real, on each individual thing, but do you ever worry about it coming undone, those 3-dimensional aspects in the dryer?
Well, because I usually use resist, like let's say I'm doing a series of spikes on something. I'll wrap each spike in a piece of saran wrap.
Okay.
And lay them down.
Okay.
The bottom is all loose fibers attached to the loose fibers on the garment, but I've protected the actual spike from sticking to anything.
Right.
And then I roll that all up and put it in there, and the base of the spike will adhere to the garment or whatever I'm making. And does that make sense?
Yes, I think I probably roll too loosely sometimes. And so I think the key there would just be making sure your piece is firmly wrapped.
Rolled up. Yeah. Well, and also because it's between two pieces of plastic and rolled up, it doesn't really have anywhere else to
Nowhere to go.
Yeah.
True. All right. And Melanie has said she just offered that about the bandages because of the other person who asked about their use for felting.
Oh,
So she was saying
thank
that
you.
they can be used for felting, but not for maybe that method. I think that's all in the chat for now again. Oh wait, so do you think this saves time, or is it just more about saving the body?
Well, it's mostly about saving your neck and shoulders from the physical rolling. I used to think it saved time until when I got my first studio in Friday Harbor, before I had a dryer, I rolled by hand for a while and I wanted to felt so much and I didn't have a dryer there. So I was rolling by hand and I realized that it really doesn't save a lot of time. Although I can tell you that when I used to do art shows, I would lay out a scarf, wet it, roll it up, put it in the dryer, lay out another scarf, wet it, roll it up. When I put that in the dryer, I took the first one out and swapped the ends, put it back in, start on the third one. I think the most I ever had at one time was 6 scarves in the dryer. Whew, that's not the kind of, I figured out I'm not crazy about production work at that point, and I don't do shows anymore. I just create for, fashion shows and stuff.
All right, and someone else said Melanie again, I do a lot of fringe work using test water locks and was worried about them felting, flopping around in the dryer. Do you use locks on your designs?
I do. One of the pieces I showed in a former meeting, Tsunami, she has a row of fringes, alternating silk fringes and curly locks across the front and sort of a Z across the whole gown in the front and the back. I simply laid a piece of the sheer plastic down and then open up the cut end of the lock and lay it on the wool. And then for the rest of the lock, it's resisted with the sheer plastic. So all along the top of just above the plastic I laid down is where I would put the top of each, fringe to fasten to the wool. But the one resist would keep them all from felting to the piece and leave them as fringe anywhere on the garment you want. You just resist it from the wool on the garment. And again, it's rolled up in between plastic, so it has nowhere to go. Any other questions?
I don't see any.
Okay.
I guess if there are no other comments, then we'll proceed with our challenge
Oh, good.
photos.
Well, thank you, Patty, though. That was fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you for having me.